could they be the latest victims of what we here on Issues call the war on women?
Issues with Jane Velez-Mitchell, next on HLN News and Views.
The war on women rages on. The youngest victims in this disgusting sex-for-money trade are underage girls, put on the streets for profit and then thrown in jail while the Johns walk free. Why are the victims being blamed? Tonight, an astounding undercover look at this horrific plague on our society.
I'm from Seattle, and I started hoeing when I was 16.
I got started in the sex industry when I was 15.
I've been in the game since I was 13.
Tonight, frightening, astounding new evidence of an American crisis that is festering right under our noses. It's the epidemic of sex trafficking. You think it's happening in some far-off exotic country? You think wrong. It's going on right down the block from you. Thousands and thousands of girls lured into sexual slavery right here in the good old US of A, hooked on drugs and forced to sell their bodies over and over again.
Virginity wasn't an option where I came from, you know, it was taken from you. And so when you get into the game, or when you like have somebody telling you, you know, you can sleep with me for money and you already lost your virginity, it's like, why not? Like, you know, it's like, why not?
There are an estimated 100,000 to 300,000 American girls being sold for sex. But the Justice Department says there are just 50, that's right, 50 beds available in facilities dedicated to helping these victims of child prostitution. Straight out to Amber Lyon, whose incredible year-long investigation will be featured in the CNN special Selling the Girl Next Door. It airs Sunday at 8 p.m. Eastern. Amber, incredible job. You talk to these young girls who really are lured into sexual slavery. Paint a picture of what they go through, because I don't think people really understand that they are often forced to sleep with not just one or two guys a night. Tell us about it.
Well, oftentimes, Jane, we've talked to some of these girls, and they say that when their pimps tell them to go out on the street, they tell them, you know what, go out tonight, and you need to get me $500 or you can't come home, or I'm going to, excuse my language, beat the crap out of you. And that's just the reality of this. And as you said, it's happening to hundreds of thousands of American girls across the U.S. And we traveled to, we went to Maryland, St. Louis, Missouri, Las Vegas, Tennessee. And in all of those locations, we found American girls being sold as sex slaves by pimps on the internet. Jane, the internet has made it so easy for pimps to sell these girls that we're seeing more and more pimps switch from drug dealing to selling girls because they can sell them over and over again. And our most vulnerable girls, the girls that run away, but not necessarily girls that are homeless living out on the street, but girls that maybe get in a fight with their parents and get mad. So they leave the house and run away, and oftentimes within 72 hours, they're picked up by a pimp.
You're absolutely right. I just attended a sex trafficking conference this past weekend in Portland, Oregon, and Sheila, the Director of Outreach Services, who was a survivor of sex trafficking, was there with me. I learned so much, Sheila. I learned that these girls are often chronic runaways. When they meet their pimp, it's at a bus stop. They offer them food and lodging, and the next thing you know, they shoot them up with drugs. Now they're drug addicts. They can't say no, and then they are forced to sleep with sometimes, I couldn't believe, 40 to 50 men a night in some cases. Tell us what you experienced, what you were forced to do, Sheila, when you were out there in sexual slavery.
When I was out there, I had actually married the guy at 16, and I had married him, and so I got involved with someone. It wasn't through drugs, but what it was through was in the guise that you love me, and so since you love me, that you would do this for me. And so for me, what I think, too, is that it's not so much that the girls that we see are hooked on drugs, but what I do see is girls that may not have a high self-esteem about themselves, or they may not have their needs met in their households when they were growing up, which causes them to believe the lie that as they get involved in this lifestyle that they can make it rich and that we can build something together.
And then they are forced to sleep with sometimes 12, sometimes 15, sometimes more Johns a night. That's a yes or no?
That's a yes.
Okay, now here's my big issue. Johns? Well, they're the average Joes. Let's forget that myth that Johns are these mysterious men in trench coats and fedoras lurking around the corner. Unfortunately, they're your dads, your sons. They're doctors, lawyers, priests. we have to ask why average American men have become so hooked on prostitutes, especially young ones. Is this the result, Dr. Reef Karim, psychiatrist, of the explosion of online porn, where men get hooked on illicit sex and all of a sudden regular sex with their life partner is just not going to do it anymore?
Yeah, Jane, I think you hit on something very important here. Online porn has created it's brought fantasy into reality, and we're seeing more and more men addicted to porn, becoming sex addicts, having problems with sexual objectification of women, whereby they're not complete, they're not happy with just regular sexual encounters with their wives or their girlfriends. You know, I've treated sex trafficking victims before, and here's the thing, you know, on Craigslist, we see all these ads. You know, about a third to more than a third of these women are underage. This is in our country right here, and these women, they may physically look like women, but they're girls. They're young girls that are not mentally ready for all of this stuff that they're encountering. So what they do is they numb out with drugs and alcohol and act out in self-destructive ways. It's an incredibly sad cycle that I'm really happy we're talking about today, because it needs to be broken.
Yeah, it absolutely does. And I talk about this in my upcoming book, Addict Nation, in depth. Some of the stuff that's happening on the internet as far as sexual exploitation of women is just jaw-droppingly awful. Patrick, Michigan, your question or thought, sir?
Well, I got a couple comments. One, I believe our system is all messed up because these pimps should be prosecuted, but instead they're patted on the shoulder and saying, well, this is a good job, keep up the good work. And the other is that I think these girls need safety. Instead of our judicial system jailing them, they need to be put into a safe home and counseled, and give, once they're showing love, then they can, the system hopefully can, you know, before putting out on the street, try to find them a job, get them hooked up, and give them a new life.
Patrick of Michigan, you make incredible points, and we do need to look at the underlying causes of all this. You know, it's easy to say, oh, these pimps are evil people, lock them up and throw away the key. Well, after attending the conference in Portland and hearing a whole bunch of experts, here's my call to action. My call to action is, in some way, shape, or form, these pimps are victims as well. We need to look at long-term solutions, like vocational training for young men so they can learn another skill aside from being a pimp. These pimps come from very low-income backgrounds, broken homes. They most often have no skills and no direction. They see their choices as selling drugs, flipping burgers, or becoming a pimp. You cannot fix this problem without treating the root cause. And Sheila Houston, we were talking about this at the conference. You were there and I was there. And, you know, we could say all these young men are evil, but the fact is that we could spend money creating vocational programs that would teach these young men when they're in their early teens how to be plumbers and cement layers and carpenters instead of becoming pimps, Sheila.
I think also one of the things that he just said, too, he didn't mention the violence of the Johns as well. See, we put it all on the pimps, but I work directly with girls, and there's a lot of violence on the streets with Johns. And we can say that even with the Green River murder that we had here in Washington State. And so I think when we look at the pimps, we need not only just to look at locking them up, we need, as Jane said, we need to rehabilitate them, but also we need to deal with the Johns, and they need to go to jail for all the violence, crimes, and even the murders that they commit.
You are right. Lock up the Johns. Now, Amber Lyons, is there any move to start locking up the Johns?
Well, you saw that the girls are the ones being locked up right now, unfortunately, Jane. That's all we really found in this documentary of as far as locking people up, because our federal government doesn't give any money to help domestic, you're seeing the handcuffs right now, domestic sex trafficking victims. We give all the money to foreign girls, not to say anyone's case is more important than the other, but we don't give money to our own girls to help them. So in our documentary, what we found, the people we found being locked up aren't the Johns, aren't the pimps. It's these poor underage sex trafficking victims, Jane.
Hold on a second. Stacey Honowitz, Florida prosecutor. We got an upside-down world here where we spend all this money locking people up, especially these young girls who are victims, and yet we are not putting the money as a society into the programs that would prevent these girls from becoming the chronic runaways and the drug users and prevent the pimps from becoming pimps and become productive members of society.
Well,
Stacey.
I can't argue with you because you're 100% right. There's no I don't have a back argument for you. It's true. I mean, this system is kind of backwards. I mean, the only thing that I can tell you is, in seeing some of these cases, when the victims, when these girls are sometimes arrested, sometimes it's a good wake-up call. I know that sounds funny, but when you're incarcerated, sometimes that's when a program is found for you. So kind of backwards, sometimes it works that you're locking up these girls that get themselves involved in the sex trade. But you're right, I mean,
Gotta leave it there. Watch Amber Lyons' incredible documentary. Way to go, Amber. You rock. Thank you. Fabulous panel. I'm Jane Velez-Mitchell. Thanks so much for being a part of our issues debate. Check out CNN.com/Jane.